I sure can. Okay, are we ready? We'll start. This session is executive functioning. So we've got some activities. We're going to do some things while we're in this session. You'll probably need a partner, so we may have to think about. In a second, we'll get some folks to move around. But we're going to. All right, and Susan, you. Okay. All right. Well, and Susan, you can stay, but you can move if you want to sit somewhere else. We'll get started just in a second. Have to allow a little transition time for us. We got about 5 minutes off schedule, I think. You do not. Once you sign in, you'll get your certificate for participating today. So we're going to get started on the executive functioning. That's going to be our whole topic for today. We've got a couple of handouts that I'm going to share with you all. But what I wanted to know is we've got like a trifold that each of you are going to get a copy of. If you're elementary, there's an elementary copy. But if you're high school, we have a 6 through 12. We're going to talk about what executive functioning is. Do you need a high school? Raise your hand. I'll bring you high school. You guys need high school? All right, and some of you may want a copy of each. I know. There you go. Yeah, and some of you may want a copy of each one of those. So we'll get those out to you. Yeah, Susan probably wants both, right? Yeah, there's one that's 6 through 12, and if you need a copy of both, it's fine. If you maybe have some kids that are okay, that'd be fine. All right. One for that. Yeah, I know those are great resources. So we're going to use those resources as we work through today. Each one of you will need one of these notes pages. All right. You'll need that. You're going to need a tic-tac-toe board. Everybody's going to need, well, you can partner with somebody, but I'm going to give every one of you a tic-tac-toe board. Yeah. I just need to get everybody a dry erase marker.
I'm very familiar with Carol Brown.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to do a little activity with that today for our session. Okay, here is the tic-tac-toe boards for you guys, a copy. Okay. Oh, it's so good, isn't it? Okay, so let's... No, I'm just getting started. So you will need a dry erase marker, and I have those up here in a bucket, so we'll get you one of those when we get to that activity. But we'll go ahead and get started. So let's talk about executive functioning skills, and then I guess Mr. May will go through those. But how are you feeling so far? What are you thinking about that? Which one of those do you relate to right now? No, I don't see tired. Not there. Not even there. Okay, you're happy. Well, as long as you're not unhappy or too bored or, feeling kind of bad, we're in pretty good shape, right? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we don't want any bored. You know what happens when we get bored, right? We find something, good or bad, to entertain us, don't we? All right, so let's talk just a little bit about what executive functioning is. One of the things that we know is we talk about that all the time, but do we define what that really is? Do we know what that really means in terms of how that looks like in special education and how that applies to the students that we work with? And so I think Mr. May is going to talk to us a little bit about this particular slide.
Yeah, so executive functioning really is all about skills, really. It's really about skills. It's about skills of organization, skills of planning, response inhibition. It's about your emotions, being able to regulate your emotions. Like recently, I've had lots of things going on in my personal family life, okay? We all do, right? How do you regulate that and still do your job as a special ed teacher? That's a question, okay? It's also about things like being able to organize your writing, being able to organize your reading so that you can answer questions from that reading or you can comprehend. It's about working memory. And it all is tremendously developed in the frontal cortex or frontal lobes of your brain. So environment plays a role in whether or not these skills are developed by the time they get to kindergarten. Now, they're not going to develop fully by the time they get to kindergarten, but they start developing at birth and all the way up through your 20s. So really, really, really an important piece. Can you plan? Can you organize yourself? Can you organize your locker, your house? I was listening to a podcast this morning on this, and the lady was talking about how this one person was always getting lots of books written. I was thinking about my colleague Dion, about how she juggles so many things at one time. And what the key was, he said, I only do one thing at a time. I only do one thing at a time, and I only do one thing. I'm focused on one thing, and that's it. And so her house was extremely organized. She was a doctor. She was writing books. She was teaching school. She was on the circuit, so to speak, speaking to folks. What I aspire to do, but never will probably get there, Susan. But those I like to talk. You guys know that. But this whole idea is that we see students with increasingly more issues because things like environmental things like environmental toxins or genetics, or so you got biology and experience that play in. Okay, and so the student's brain has the basic neurological equipment for executive skills to develop. And remember, I said it takes them, like the man, I think it takes a little longer for some of these things to develop, right? Just the brain is a little slower to develop. The woman, typically developing person, those skills develop a little sooner, maybe in the early 20s, and maybe the man's in the mid 20s. If you're putting an average on it. And you can't always say particular when you're talking about generalizations, right? So trauma to the frontal lobe of the brain will cause executive functioning issues. Kids can't plan. Kids can't they can't regulate. They can't do all those things. And then genetics plays a role. If the parent has it, it's a good chance that the kid's going to have the problem. Okay, the working memory issues, and we know how working memory impacts everything we do educationally, right? And being able to plan and organize impacts writing and reading so much. So anything that is biologically or physically toxic during infancy or childhood can affect the development of executive skills, environmental toxins, socioeconomic circumstances. My wife's a kindergarten teacher. She's always told me, if the kid's hungry, if the kid's dirty, if the kid's unhappy, we got to get all that taken care of before we can teach them anything. All right. So that environmental piece, that socioeconomic piece, for coming from places of poverty, if they're being socially and emotionally traumatized, we see that those things go out the door. They can't regulate themselves. They can't focus. They're thinking about something else. They're worried about. I've got a 5-year-old grandbaby. If she's worried, she's not going to learn as well, right? And so chronic significant stress, maternal depression, and low educational attainment all play a part in this. And so that is basically, then when we talk about these things, definitions and descriptions of executive function, cognitive process that enable a person to engage in problem solving and goal-oriented behaviors. Like I said, planning. Being able to plan your life out, being able to plan the next step, being able to organize your time, being able to regulate your mood and not have it affect your work and your production. Those are all what we're talking about, and that processing, that whole processing piece where you're able to hold information in your brain so you can, for a minute or two, and you can apply it, that working memory piece where you can apply it to other areas of more difficult maybe tasks educationally. And then cognitive skills used to organize, self-monitor, control, or direct one's behavior toward purposeful goals. And then those higher order cognitive processes involved in the self-regulation of behavior. So that's basically it. There are, I think, 11 or 12, depending on who's counting, different variations of this. And so Dion's going to talk to you about that, and then we're going to get into some activities because we have bunk beds and we have tons of room for activities, right? We always when you put in bunk beds, you got more room for activities in your bedroom. Dion loves
Dean Paul always makes a movie reference. I never get them because I don't watch movies. I still don't even know that one. He gets me every time. I'm going to give you guys a paper And we're going to start, before I go into those 11 or 12 things that we're going to talk about today, I'm going to give you this paper, and you're going to use this. We're going to use different pages as we go along. So this is just my little white paper folded up. But the first thing we're going to do is thinking about how we organize, how we have self-monitor, how do we control or regulate our behavior. We're going to do a little activity called a brain dump. And we're going to just write down on your paper. You don't have to share it with anybody, but you may, write down some things that you might want to be able to share with with somebody sitting next to you. But let's take it. We're going to take a minute, and we're going to write down everything that you've got going on, circling in your brain right now. Right? Mine's thinking about, my house might be dirty, my feet's hurting. I got training. What is it? Let's take 1 minute and write down everything that you can get in a minute that's circling in your head right now. Okay, so now look at your list. Is it a to-do list? Is it just things that you got thinking about?
It's just stuff this evening.
Okay, things you got going on in your life? Okay, now, does anybody want to share? Does anybody want to share their list?
I'll share.
Okay, share your list with
I
me.
have 3 annual reviews by Monday. I gotta get school supplies for my 5-year-old.
Okay, that's good.
My house needs to be cleaned. I need to plan an anniversary trip. What's my roster gonna look like? And how am I going to get up and get everyone ready for school when I'm off my schedule so bad?
That is fantastic. Thank you for sharing. So let's go back and talk about that a little bit. So, does anybody else want to share?
Anybody else?
Anybody else want to share? Okay, let's can we use yours as an example? So let's think about, she's got a lot of things circling in her head. That's very similar to what a lot of us are thinking about. So what I would ask that you do, and you can look at your own list, is how would you prioritize that? What is the priority of the things that are circling in your head right now? What is that immediate thing that you need to take care of?
Well, for me, 1 annual review is due tomorrow. So this evening, I've got to get on Infinite with all the new changes. There's something that probably used to take me a couple hours to do now.
Okay.
I'm gonna have my mom come and watch my 5-year-old this evening. So
Okay.
I can concentrate.
Okay, so that's an excellent. So priority number 1. So you're going to put a little number 1 beside of that activity. All right. What's the next thing?
Probably need to clean my house.
Okay. So priority 2. So you're going to put a little. You're going to put a little 2 by that area. Okay. What else?
Number 3 would probably be getting back to schedule.
Okay.
A couple of weeks before school starts.
Mhm.
Train myself to go to bed.
Okay.
Get up on time.
Okay. So that's not probably going to happen tonight, because you got to get ready for the ARC. Then the next day you're going to be working on cleaning your house. So then the next day you're going to maybe prioritize your schedule. So on Friday or Saturday, I'm going to set my bedtime at 11 o'clock. Okay. Then let's look at your next list activity on your list.
Well, it'll probably be purchasing school supplies.
Okay.
My daughter's starting kindergarten.
Okay.
So that's a big change.
So what day would you buy school supplies? What day?
Sunday afternoon.
Okay.
Sit down.
So on Sunday afternoon, you're going to have your list and you're going to go to Walmart to purchase your school supplies. Okay? And what's the next thing you're going to do?
I'll probably start trying to figure out an overnight trip for my husband.
Okay. Okay, so Sunday when you get back from shopping for school supplies, you're going to get on the internet and you're going to surf the net to find a really cool hotel for your anniversary trip, right? But so what we did is we problem. All right. So what happened there?
It'll be good by Monday.
So now you have a plan in place. Part of that working through that executive functioning is that we get so overwhelmed with all of those things circling in our head that we forget to take that time, and when it helps us to prioritize our time. So you've got a plan you've got a 5-day plan about how I'm getting this work done, right? So you can turn that into a checklist. You can turn this into a calendar, a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday,
And
right?
Dion, I think it's also important to teach our kids, as we teach our kids, that, if you don't do these kinds of things and develop these kinds of skills, there's consequences and repercussions. That's another movie reference for you. But honestly, when you think about it, I mean, if you don't get done what you have to get done, like the ARC meeting, somebody's going to be hollering at you, right? Kelly's going to be saying, "Why didn't you do that?" So there's a little more skin in the game for that one, and so we got to teach our kids about that, because when you're a kid, you're thinking, you know how your time management changes. It's like a week just seems like a year when you're a kid, right? And you got all kinds of time to do everything. So it's very important that we teach that as we move through.
It is. Do you mind if we use your example that you had? So let's talk a little bit. What was one of the things that you had that was circling in your head right now? Okay, yeah. Yeah. I want to use. You can go ahead and share your list, but I want to use your example if you don't care. Go ahead.
My hair looks funny.
Okay.
My dog probably needs to pee right now.
Okay. Okay, so those are important things that are circling around in your head for you right now. It's okay, because those things are happening and you're thinking about those things. And I particularly wanted to talk about the one that's circling around in your head right now about weather aware. Why is it that you are weather aware? What makes it?
My dog doesn't like thunderstorms.
Okay, so thunderstorms are a concern for you.
We are in Hazard and I have to drive home in the rain.
Okay, so you got a long drive. Okay,
I don't want to do that.
right.
I just want my car washed.
Okay, right. It's the reality of things. Okay.
And did you make any connection between the stormy weather and the frizzy hair?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. I just wondered about
All
that.
right, but so those things that she's thinking about, the stormy weather, the reason I was asking you is if you've experienced, just as we did this last year about this time, a flash flood that was a record. Mm-hmm. Right, it's a trigger, or it's a thing that inhibits your ability to think and process through things. But by doing activities like we're just talking about, is that something that you want to be aware of? And so maybe you say at 11:45 when we take a break, I'm going to check the weather, right? But you plan out, and so then you take that task off from circling in your brain because you've written it on paper. So you said at 11:45, I'm gonna check the weather, and so and maybe your hair too when you go in there, and make sure you're not having the fuzz. But it allows your brain to release some of those things that are circling because you've assigned that to a time and a schedule or a place in your calendar for today. Just like you probably assign that what you're going to do with your ARC meeting. You know what's going to happen when you finish today. You're on your way back. You're going to be processing, and when you get home, you're going to open up your computer and you're going to start on your meeting. But it allows you to free up some of that space. So a little simple activity like a brain dump is real good to just let you be centered and focus back on how you organize and prioritize. You can turn that in a to-do list or calendar, whatever works better for you. But we teach kids the same thing, because if I'm worried about the weather, I'm not going to be able to be focused on learning, right? So that's a distraction for me. So that helps me to self-regulate. It helps me to say, oh, okay, this is what I can do to check that, or this is what I can do about that particular thinking. Anybody else got one they want to share before we go on? You got one?
Sometimes kind of broad, that I can organize.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I'm thinking is the new changes in our food,
Mm-hmm.
then lunch,
Okay.
and then while we were in session, my cousin called and they're trying to organize his baby clothes for us to buy.
Mm-hmm.
So I was about to put it on my mind. Then what am I fixing for supper?
Mm-hmm.
And then goodness, what is going to happen this new school year?
Right. So let's think about that. Okay, so that's a good one. So what's first? What's the most important thing you got to do right now?
I guess I'm trying to figure out. I guess lunch.
Okay. So what we're going to eat for lunch? You want to? Yeah, we're going to break at 11:45 for lunch, and we're going to have a taco bar today.
I checked on that too.
Yeah, that's right. So you helped you to check. Okay. What else is important then?
I guess the one I'm fixing for supper
Okay.
because I'm gonna have to figure that out.
All
Do I
right.
want to fix something big or do I want to sandwiches? Do we need to stop at the store and like?
I'm going to tell you that's a yeah. That's a reality, right? That is really a reality every day.
And then maybe on our break, I'm gonna call probably
Mhm.
my sister and see if
Right.
I got in contact
Yep.
with them about the baby clothes because I had to see their numbers.
Okay.
And then I guess the next thing would be, I probably sometime at some point, maybe this weekend, Sunday or Monday, first thing, I'm gonna go on Infinite Campus.
Okay. So you got a plan for that. Okay. Okay.
And then I'm gonna go to school probably, I've got 2 meetings next week, so I'll learn how the school year's gonna count. So, that's all.
You're going to learn how you're going to embrace this next school year. Right. Okay. But you prioritize
Say
those
no
things.
groceries.
And that's the reality every day. We've
you've
got
been
those
on the
realities.
daggone trip
I
for
worry every
two-
day.
two
Well, I
months.
used to worry every day about supper. Now we just
That looks like
find whatever we can eat. I used to worry about supper, but I had to let supper go. I had to let supper go because I got too many things. Yeah. But it's a problem. It's a problem for me.
It's easy. It's easy to get.
Yeah.
They made it too easy.
Yeah.
Direct flight.
Yeah. I'll be on my way home and think, what can I pick up on the way out?
And it's
Yeah,
cheap.
because you got to let some things
And the
go,
hotels.
right? You got so many plates
We went
circling.
and watched
That's
the
right.
Summer League hotel.
That's right.
Playing
Yeah,
for
that's the way we
$6.25
do.
a person.
So thinking about that, and we think about that reality for us as adults, and the older I get, the more I realize that I really have some of those characteristics of probably an attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I'm pretty sure that I do, and I notice those. But when I go through these skills and these function skills, you may say, "Oh, that's me," or "That's me," because every time I look through these, I thought, "Oh, that's me." That's the way I am
I'm
too.
the same. I can relate to every one of them.
Yeah.
Susan doesn't have any groceries, so she's really worried about that.
So now she's worried.
because she's been on a world tour here and been on a great trip up in the Northeast.
Oh, that's
I
great.
keep up with her on Facebook. We're big buddies.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it was a great trip.
Oh,
Yeah.
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 That's great. Yeah, that's right. Take the trip.
So call me after you get groceries and I'll come over.
I saw this thing that. All right. So let's talk about executive functioning skills. So depending on like what Dean Paul said, depending on where you look or what the reference source is, there are 11 or 12 executive functioning skills. So some of those are internal skills that we do, and some things are external. But what we know about executive functioning is that those have to happen concurrently. There's some things you got to process and think about, and then there's some things in your environment that happen. So we're just going to cover some of those. We're going to go through those executive function skills because it's important that we know what those are. Then it helps us to plan for how we're going to provide supports for our students. That helps us plan to really understand and know what specially designed instruction is and how do we deliver that? How do we support that child? Because when I first started thinking about executive function skills, I started thinking about that kids that have trouble with disorganization, order, keeping things together. And I think about kids who are OHI. But when I started looking even deeper into that, I look at working memory or emotional control. So our working memory could be our children with intellectual disabilities like MMD or FMD. And then if it's an emotional control, that could be our kids that are EBD. Right, so this really encompasses a lot of kids, and our SLD kids, if you think about them, they have a lot of trouble with organization or disorganization.
And you know, Dion, as I look at this and I think about your daughter Emma, and I think about my daughter Sydney, you could look at what they're doing in their lives right now, and you can apply just about every piece of this to that. So it's not only for students with disabilities, but
Absolutely.
it's for all of us.
Yeah.
It applies to everybody in our lives. And so, I just think about, Sydney's in PA school, Emma's studying to be a dentist, and working memory becomes a huge piece for them. And one of the things that we want to do with students is we want to teach them how to improve their memory. I'm telling you, that's so key. And just about every kid to a man in special education, if you look at their psychological, if you look what Ken Epperson's done for you up there in Floyd County, or if you look what Barry's done in McGoffin, almost all of them have working memory issues. And so important. And I don't mean to get off script.
So I'm working with a young student that I really feel like has executive functioning difficulty, and the parents is convinced that the child has a disability. I'm not so sure at his young age it's quite disability. I think society creates a lot of this, and I don't know that socioeconomic status is the only. I don't think low socioeconomic status is the only socioeconomic status. I think also it's middle and upper, because everyone's lives with their work schedule is so busy. We have a lot of grandparents that are babysitting. It's easier to give in to demands than it is to, and you're the grandparent. You shouldn't have to be the disciplinarian. But I don't like this term, helicopter parents, but we live in such a fast-paced world. It's faster for me to put their shoes on for them than it is for them me to have to take the time for them to do that themselves. So I don't know what you call that. I call it survival parenting, because that's how I had to live my life too, not necessarily a helicopter, but I see more kids entering school with more difficulties in these multiple areas. And I'm not so sure they're all disabled.
Yeah. Well,
Just for the lack of being, of letting them
Right.
do it on their own. Let me just do it for them.
more independence.
Exactly.
Versus
And
an
it's
independence. Yeah.
necessity. It's not really anyone.
Enabler, and you don't even do.
Absolutely.
I always said that with my oldest one. If there was something he couldn't or didn't do, it was my fault. And we lived by schedule. I had to get out the door. I was working hard.
Yeah.
And so,
Oh, I agree.
and it's hard to pull back, because if you fight that battle, I'm a working parent. I don't get to spend as much time with
Yeah, it
them.
is.
So the whole time you're with them, you don't have to be constantly on them.
Yeah.
It's a battle for sure.
It is. It is a battle. And I think that's a valid point, because, I didn't know that I had ADHD until I figured it out on my own. Nobody told me I had it. Right? So I didn't know. So I'm from a middle class family, and I made it all the way through school. And nobody didn't tell me I had that, but I
Steph-
figured it out.
Stephanie always likes to remind me that I have it, because when she comes in my office, I've got 75 tabs across the top of my computer open.
I can't stand that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I told y'all, as we go through these, you're going to be like, oh, that's me.
Oh, yeah.
That's me.
Yeah.
All
Sorry,
right.
go
So
ahead.
let's talk about this response inhibition. And you all should have a notes page if you want to write notes on your notes page. We gave you this also as a structure for you to be able to take notes on, because we're going to just quickly move through these. So we're going to talk about response inhibition. So that's one of those executive functioning skills. And that one is, can you think before you speak or act? Or can you delay or inhibit responding? Because we have to evaluate. So if somebody says something to you that makes you angry, do you have the ability to just pause and process that before you respond and say something inappropriate? And do our kids have that? Right? Do our kids have that ability? Maybe if they've been fighting with their siblings in the home, they just immediately respond. But so do we have that? And so this is what it looks like in the classroom setting if you have trouble with this response inhibition. So you're going to have trouble blurting out in class. What about those kids that it doesn't matter what popsicle stick routine you use, they're going to just call out the answer. They may have inappropriate behavior. They talk back, or they start the task without reading the directions. They don't think through. They are sometimes our writers who maybe will give us a rough draft of a piece of text and they never go back to read it again because they went all the way through it and there's nothing else they can do to respond. That's when they don't have the ability to plan and organize their writing because they're just quick to respond, to move through that. They go through their assignments just to get done.
And applying this to our psychological report,
Absolutely.
you would reply. You might look in there and you might find that processing speed is a well-developed skill. Just because you can process doesn't mean you always process it correctly.
That's correct. That's right.
So think about that too.
Yeah. And so those kids are going to have trouble waiting their turn. They're going to have trouble being able to share materials, control their movement around the room. So those kids, right? You've had kids that have that. So what is it that we can do about it? Well, how can we modify the environment? So those are one of the things that you can do. What are those external things that we can control? Is it where they sit at? Is it where they're at in the room? Do we have to use more close proximity, or do we have to have a space in the room that is more controlled than another space in the classroom? Can we use a cue? Can we use a cue for appropriate behavior? You all may have seen Doug walking around today, and he had this lanyard on, and on his lanyard there's a green and a red. So that cue is you flip that card around if you have a student that's misbehaving or that's off task or whatever, and you flip that card around. Green is we're good to go, but if you flip the card on red, that means that they need to consider that behavior, or that's a visual cue for them, right? There's 100 different kinds of cues that you can use. But how can we modify that environment to help that child understand and regulate that behavior? Because they don't have that ability, right? So we're going to have to teach them that skill. And so what do? So we can use the prompting, right? We can use prompts. We can use physical prompts. We can use visual prompts. We can use, verbal prompts. But, we might want to have that if it's in the middle of a lesson, something very discreet, right? Turn that card over on their table. A card on your lanyard like that, a visual prompt where you can just reference it. And the other thing is, how do we teach that delayed gratification? And that's something we're going to have to say, okay, after you've completed 10 minutes of this task, then you're going to get to do this, right? And then we may have to train them over time to be able to do that because they don't have that regulatory ability. Any thoughts about that one? So that's really cool. So that's what the kids that we have, we see those instances where they have those behaviors. Comments, thoughts about that one? Y'all ever had kids like that in your class? Yeah. All right. The next one's going to be one we're going to talk about too. So let's talk about our working memory. And so that's where I was thinking, sometimes we think about those executive skills, but our kids with intellectual disabilities, sometimes they have a very slow working memory process. So we have to come up with help them be able to scaffold that. So that's what we're talking about with scaffold. So let's say I can't hold a bunch of numbers in my head at one time. I'm going to have a scaffold, or I may not be able to do 3 steps in a row. Right? I might not be able to do 3 things that you just told me to do. Get out your paper and pencil, turn your book to page 32, and then answer questions 1 through 9. Okay, I might not be able to do that if I have a working memory issue. So what am I going to do? What am I going to be able to do to be able to work on that and improve my working memory? So let's see what it looks like in the classroom. No, yeah, there it goes. So that means they can't follow multi-step directions. They don't get their work done because they forgot, right? Have you ever been on a task or trying to remember a number and you get back to that number and you forgot what that number? It happens to me all the time when they send you these codes, right? You got to remember those codes, and then you got to put those in to verify. You might have trouble, things that holding out lots of information, reading comprehension. If I've gotten distracted, or if I can't hold that in my memory, those things that I just read, I'm going to lose them, right? That's when we start thinking about, that's how we chunk information, or that's how we teach kids then to do a paragraph at a time, or we just do a little excerpt at a time, and we process that chunk and that information. And it's the same thing with writing or with math problem solving. So how can we change that? What can we do in the environment? So there's some assistive technology. We can use calendars. We can use notebooks. We can use all kinds of technology now that we've got Chromebooks that might have, we could give them, drop it in our Google Classroom, the pictures of what the task is. This is what I do first, and then next. Right? And last. These are what my tasks are. So there are ways that we can do that. And the same thing with cueing. We can have those verbal reminders. We can just say, remember. You can also, I saw that you have a little strip you put on their desk, and that's step 1, step 2, and step 3. You know, get out your materials. Step 2 is open your book to the appropriate page. Step 3 is get your paper out and start the task, right? But you can put those right on kids' desks. So there's some things that we can modify in that environment to help them be successful. And those can be very discreet. I love a good Post-it note with little reminders on that for me, right? And I may have Post-it notes all over everything.
She has a post on graveyard.
Right?
And she is really good at organizing things, so she'll put post-it notes on my wall.
Yeah, we did put a Post-it on Deepaw's wall yesterday. So how do we think about that? So there's prompts that we can do as teachers. We can have some way for reminder. Right? You know, hey, you can have, like in your Google Classroom, things pop up and you can send a message to the class. You can do something like that. So there's ways that we can help kids. We can help them work between cue and the work in memory. So we can work on work in memory. And we talked about it just a minute ago, and I heard you all already reference it. Dr. Carol Brown and that work with equipping minds. How do we strengthen that work in memory? And she believes that the brain has fluidity, that we can increase cognitive capacity. She believes that through her research, and she's proven very both quantitative and qualitatively that you can do that. So she believes that. So we're going to have a little exercise right now that we're going to practice one of her games, because playing games and doing things to improve memory are part of what we can do in our classroom instruction. So everybody has a tic-tac-toe board. So I'm going to have to ask you, though, to find a partner, because one of you can use the tic-tac-toe board, but you'll need a partner. So everybody find a partner, and in that red tub right there are dry erase markers. All right? And we're going to try a game of tic-tac-toe. And you can choose whoever wants to use their board, because those are dry erase and you can erase it off. But let's think about our work in memory. We're gonna experience that. Do y'all have a dry erase marker back there? Okay. So if you, I'm gonna do. All right. So what we're gonna ask you to do is just choose a board right now, and just play the traditional way of X's and O's only on one board. Just play a regular game of tic-tac-toe. Y'all choose which board. Y'all can work as partners. Just play your game of tic-tac-toe, all in fun. You decide who's the X and who's the... Flip a coin. Yeah, X goes first.
We could have said something like whoever's the oldest in the group.
Yeah, we could have.
Yeah, that'd be me.
All right. So play a game or two like that. Just get comfortable working with your partner. Play just 2 turns. Yeah, and if you need, we got some markers that have erasers on top. So let me give you guys one of these fancy erasers on top with your dry erase marker. So you can erase your board, but you go ahead and play that game.
I'm going to put a plug in for those fancy markers there.
Mm-hmm.
Those things are awesome, by the way.
Oh, you all already got one.
If you've got smaller kids, they can't beat them down.
Yeah.
They are very good about holding their shape.
All right. So finish you a couple games. See how you feel about the tic-tac-toe. See how confident you feel.
Her son is 6 months of Dr. Brown.
It's great. Yeah, she does a good job with that. Mm-hmm. Can you see? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you do. And it helps you to, it's just a different way to think about it. Okay, is everybody got their board cleaned? Is that y'all good? Anybody win? All right. Anybody have a draw? Okay, now we're going to do it just a little bit differently. So we're going to use one of her strategies, and we're going to talk about, we're going to play this game, and one of you is going to use one board, and one of you is going to use the other board. And we're going to play tic-tac-toe. I mean, you're going to use the same sheet, but let me borrow yours. So these two gals right here are going to play tic-tac-toe, and Susan's going to use this side, and you're going to use this side. So you're not going to, but you got to remember where Susan's at. You can't put that on here, right? So you're going to have to play that tic-tac-toe game. Does everybody understand what I'm saying on that? So Susan's going to say something, and we'll just go right along, and we'll put a plug in for Carol Brown. This is the way she does this, and this enhances and works with your working memory. But Susan's saying, I'm going to I see myself putting, who's it going to be X? Who's X? Are you X? Okay, you're X. That's fine. What's your name?
Marianne.
All right, Marianne. Marianne's going to put an X, and she's going to say, I see myself putting an X in the bottom right corner. And so she's going to put that X there. And then Susan's going to have a turn, and Susan's going to say, I see myself putting an O in the center cube. All right, so you're playing two separate boards on the same sheet. And you all have to, in memory, you have to make sure that you know where they're at, and we're going to see who wins. It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same.
The way she's looking at it to where that's the way you're also looking at it.
All right, so try it out. All right. And you say, I see myself putting an X. I see myself putting an O.
Now, are you going to talk to them about numbering those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then you do it in your head?
I haven't yet. But I was going to let them, what I was going to do
you want
next.
me to
What I was
talk
going to
to
do
them
next is
about
have them bring this right here like this and then play against each other.
So they need to know how to number those.
That'd be fine if you want to do that section, because I'm going to try to have, what time have I got? Yeah, I'm going to have to move on.
Putting it on the right bottom.
Yeah. Yeah, if you want to do that section here and let them, well, I want them to do the one where they hold it up and then they put the divider between it. And then, now they do it like that. I want them to feel that cognitive. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I guess we could have done that. Yeah. Okay, all right. Yeah, yeah, she's got her O is.
Right, is that not where my X is?
Mm-mm. Right there's your X. So it's this is this laying right on top of this one.
Oh, so I was on that X.
So you all are, yeah.
Put your X there.
Yeah, so you can't put the X there because she's got you blocked.
But I can't put my
And she's saying, yeah, it's, yeah,
So I'll have to put that.
yeah, yes. I will let you guys kind of think through. How's it going back there? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yep. That's exactly. Yeah. That's exactly. Okay. So because really, if you picked this one up and laid it on top of this one, that's exactly the way a tic-tac-toe board would look. All right. Okay. So now you can erase. After you finish, we're going to do one more thing. Yeah. This absolutely helps with visual spatial perception, doesn't it? So Stephanie's going to do one more with us after, she's got one more little thing to do with us after you all finish this game. So go ahead and finish your game. Anybody win? Are you a tie?
She's talking about that her son got so good at not putting it on here in his mind.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if I can, that's what Stephanie was just talking about. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing what they can hold in there. And then when they transfer that to that academic piece, it's amazing.
What I found was 0. What really took 10, we had come to a low point of reading.
Yeah,
And if it was, he didn't have enough working memory
that's right. Yeah.
to
For the,
move forward.
yeah. Absolutely.
And it also helped him with
Mm-hmm. Multi-step. Mm-hmm.
like go downstairs, get the garbage, take it out, put a new garbage bag in. Like before, he wouldn't have been able to.
To remember all 4 of those. Yeah, that is great. That is great. You guys go ahead and race your board. Yeah, that is so good. That is so good. I mean, you can tell the difference. She'd probably love to hear that story, that testimony of how, because,
I actually worked under Carol Brown.
uh-huh.
And
Did you? Yeah. That's great. Yeah, that is great. It is great. It's really true. All right. So Stephanie's going to lead us through the next one. So y'all take just a second and erase your board. Here, Stephanie, you want to lead us through the next
Sure.
one? So Stephanie's got a little twist and turn on this one before we go to the next one. And then I got to get moving through this.
So Denny, Paul, and I went to Carol's training, and one of the things that she does for you is you kind of have to think of it as she made it perfect battleship, right? So you can put that, you're going to put a wall there. Now you've got to really describe where I'm putting my things. So you're going to talk about left and right. You're going to talk about, am I at the top? Am I at the bottom? Am I at the center? Right? So all those words are coming true for our kids. But then after you do that, because remember, you can't see the other person's, and you got to keep that in your mind. But then after you do that, let's think about numbering those off. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? As we're going across. And so I should be able to say, I'm putting an X on 9. And then she's going to come up and say, well, I'm putting an O on 5. And so I know that's where that's at. And then I'm going to say, well, I'm putting an X on 8. I've got that bottom row. I'm almost there, right? And she's like, oh, no, because I'm putting an O on 7. So now I got to remember, she's got an O on 7, she's got an O on 5. Oh, I've got to put that X on 3 because she's going to be, I've got to block her. Now at that point, she's got to remember, oh, she's got that X on 9 and she's got an X on 3. I've got to make sure I get that O on 6. And so it's doing that against each other. That's the point we want to get them to. But she made a good point. Sometimes our kids can't remember. So if I've got that battleship there, that block, maybe they need to put something in the corner of one of the things just to kind of remember where they're at. And then gradually make sure we release that, right? And they're no longer doing that. That's one of the things we want to do. I'm going to put another plug in because she gave me the microphone and it was her fault. We're talking about working memory. We want our kids to listen. We want them to be actively engaged during our classes. So one of the things that we can do, because I know nobody got over to sketch notes this morning, but sketch notes is another way to get us very actively engaged in our lesson because it's active listening and changing that listening to a visual on their page. And so if you get a chance later on, watch some videos on sketch notes, look at what they look like because they're really starting to put that now. They have to put their listening abilities to a visual. We know that in mathematics, we call it the CSA model. And I know most of you guys have heard me talk about the CSA model. So it's concrete, right? We also know that the semi-concrete, where the kid is drawing it out, is what actually puts it in the brain. That's what causes that working memory to really start to form, and they get an understanding of it. So by doing sketch notes, we're actually creating that working memory for our kids and getting a visual image started for them. So if I'm doing this, and I can give them prompts to do sketch notes, and I've got some, if anybody wants me to hand you some prompts today, feel free to go ask and I'll go get them, okay? So here we go.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. So let's try it one more time, and then we'll get through the rest of them. Let's go ahead and make the tic-tac-toe. We've got to hold, one of y'all hold the board up. You got to hold the board up so you can't see each other what you're doing. So we'll just go with the X's and O's right now. All right, and you all give that, and I'll give you about a minute to do that, and then we'll move on to the next section. I heard that saying. Yeah, that's what I heard. So I'm gonna give everybody about a minute to try this. I just thought this was. About 30 more seconds. Has anybody won yet? You need another minute?
I think that people don't realize, like, I teach 3 and 4-year-olds and help with 3 and 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
Like my daughter right now, all we do is play Disney Memory.
Yeah.
And like she's totally into that, you know.
Yeah.
How that is so developmental for them.
Absolutely. How games can be fun, but also work on that working memory. You know, Uno's a good thing. Spotted is a good game. There's all kinds of things that, yeah. All right. How did that feel? Did that strain your brain a little bit? Right? It makes you feel. Yeah. Did you dump all your stuff out this morning, Susan? Yeah.
Carol Brown. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
That's what we
Now you can see it on the paper, right? Yeah. Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and work through a few more of those. There's 11. If we get through all of them, that'd be great. But you'll got the resource now, but we'll get the gist of it. But we're going to work through a few more. I think this one is another one. Our emotional control. And this one was for our kids, you know, especially our ABD kids, but our kids with impulsivity. You know, emotional control, being able to regulate that, to be able to control, to stay on task.
So that's your kid when you're playing this game, when they lose, they're going to totally freak out.
They're going to be very frustrated, right? So they may have to have some extra support on that to work through. That's where you're going to be teaching some of that skill development about taking turns, about working with partners, right? Those real life skills that we got to have. Absolutely. Sportsmanship. And I'm one of these people, I have a low frustration level. So if I try to assemble something, I generally do not. And I will generally have pieces laying all over the place, right? Because I work for a little bit, but then I get frustrated with it. And then sometimes they have trouble handling those emotions, right? They have trouble regulating emotions. They get angry really quickly, so they have that regulation issue. They have trouble working in groups and getting along with other peers. So what does that look like? And you guys can put these notes in there, but you can also have those trifolds that you can keep. But how do we modify that? Well, sometimes we can prep that kid for a situation. You know, I think about our kids with a fire alarm. Right? You know how we have some kids maybe with autism, but when the fire alarm goes off, it's a panic. Right? But we can prep them for that. Yes, right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So those are things that if we know that's a problem for kids, how we can plan for them. The other thing is, you know, we got to teach those coping skills. And some of those are embedded already in some of the curricula that we use. I think about like Second Step, or we have some of those different programs that we work with kids for social emotional learning. PBIS, we're teaching some of those things. Breaking tasks down into smaller steps, chunking information. Lots of those things can help us with that emotional control. We have to help kids figure out what triggers them. What strategy can I use with them? Can I use a meditation or a relaxation technique? Can I use a counting backwards from 10 technique? Right? Or do mindful activities in the classroom. Those take less than 5 minutes that you can teach kids to regulate behaviors with those mindfulness. Now, this one is another one on flexibility. And here is, if you ever have those kids that you've got a plan, and then when something doesn't work out on that plan, they can't see any other way to problem solve. So that's the ones we're talking about there. And so how do we do that? So part of that, you're going to have trouble adjusting to strategies, or when something happens different in their schedule, like something happens and we don't get to go to specials, right? You know how kids have trouble with that sometimes.
We get tore up over that.
Yeah. Or they can't see another person's point of view. So if Mr. May and I are having a dispute and I am mad, but he sees something very different, I can't understand his perception of that because it's only about my thinking.
Right. One of the things on flexibility, go ahead, Dion, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
One of the things on flexibility, it said, the example that I saw and read about was you fix you a bowl of, or you fix you a pot of soup, but you don't have a bowl to eat it out of. So what do? You could use a cup, or you can eat it right out of the cooker, right? So do I have the flexibility to think about that? You see what I'm saying? The cognitive flexibility to problem solve. Go ahead.
Right, and I think that's a good one. So that's the thing that, consistency is important. We talk about schedule changes and routines that change a little bit different. We might modify what the task is for them to do. And sometimes they just need a little more support. They just need us to kind of walk them through or scaffold things like that for us.
And if you're working with little kids, you see this kindergarten, why do we line up? Why do we run centers? Why do we have real explicit instructions? Because routine works, right? Routine works for everybody.
It does.
And if you don't teach that, boy, you can have some real problems. When the routine is required, man.
That's right. Here's some examples of some teaching strategies. So when you scan and you have access to this PowerPoint that has all the answers in them. But thinking about those teaching strategies, those think alouds, but those social stories that we do sometimes. We can do social stories with our kids. That's some good SEL things that we can do in our classroom to help teach kids with those strategies. All right, let's talk about attention, and we just got a few more. I'm trying to get on through these. We were going to do a little scaffold, but we've taking a little bit of time. Here's the ability to be focused and resist distractions. That's what it looks like in the classroom. And so I was driving to work this morning, and I was thinking about the sessions, and then all of a sudden I wanted to think about something, how many people were registered for something else. So I was going to pull off and check to see how many were registered, and I thought I had to talk myself through that. You can wait until you get to work to check that, but this is what you need to do first, right? I had to talk myself through that process. I was going to pull off the road and check that because it hit me right then when I was driving. That's exactly right. But I had to talk myself through it. I'd coach myself through it because that happens to me. And sometimes I have to talk to myself about, you remember your priority. Sometimes I have to do a little brain dump with a Post-it note, and I have to say, which one of these is absolutely essential right now? And again, we have to teach kids that.
So I was thinking the same thing last night as I was on my way home. I needed to know, my son's trying to rent an apartment. My daughter's having some marital issues, and got a lot of things going on. So I was checking my phone. Guess what I was also doing? Speeding. And I got a ticket. Because I don't do that. But I was thinking a so hard thing. Because we worked so hard yesterday getting ready. Boom. All of a sudden, that's one time, consequences and repercussions.
Yeah.
I didn't tell my wife because she chewed my rear for that, but can't speed on that.
You
Can't
cannot.
speed, not anymore. They keep adding cops. Yeah.
Yeah.
So be careful on the way home. Be careful on the way home. That's the takeaway. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I turned my thing on. Okay, so a couple more. I'm just going to move on through these just a little bit.
Yeah.
But we're talking about attention. I like this one right here. Using timers might work. For me, a timer's not going to work because it's just going to increase my anxiety because I got to hurry. But some kids need timers. Okay, I'm working 10 minutes. When the timer goes off and it's something I'm not enjoying doing, I'm going to have a highly preferred activity that I can do for a few minutes, right? And that's okay that we teach kids that, and then we just continue to extend the time that we do a least preferred activity to a preferred activity.
Sometimes kids, when you use timers with them, they get fixated on those, right?
Okay.
Remember my story about Andrew?
Yes.
That was the one thing. He was trying to elope the classroom constantly because he wanted back to the timer.
Yep.
I used to use the sticky note, I saw that on there.
Yeah.
I use that with.
You want me to go back?
Kids.
Oh,
You
yeah.
didn't have to go back.
But timers,
Yeah.
timers can help others.
Yeah.
If they stayed on task, I'm going to a time, and I say, here's a tally mark.
Yes.
And for each tally mark, they got so many minutes.
Perfect. Yeah, that is perfect. That's a perfect system and the other thing is, it's what works for your kid. Yeah,
Them watching the time.
that's right. Because sometimes that is a little bit uncomfortable. But you can use a sticky note on their desk. And this is how many minutes. So there's all kinds of ways to do that.
I have issues where I travel to
Yeah.
different schools of staying too long
Yeah.
at
With the, yeah.
classrooms.
Yeah. So you intentionally, yeah. So you've developed some skills probably, and you kind of talk yourself through that. That's the last one we talk about, that metacognition. You have to talk yourself through it. We're talking about getting a task initiating. That's just getting started on an undue procrastination. Sometimes I do that. I try not to do that, but sometimes I do.
Dion, I think about my oldest daughter here. She was raised by my mother, and my mother has a tendency to do everything for you. She's one of those doers, you know. And so now my daughter, one of the residual effects of that environment was that she has a hard time getting tasks started. So she's got a baby. Like, okay, the baby's 5. You've got to move to the booster seat from the car seat. You know, you've got to move out of the DockATot into a different phase. Yeah,
Yeah,
So there's always,
yeah.
can always tie it back to something.
Yeah,
So,
you can. So anyway, this one's, when we have kids that have trouble getting tasked, we can give them verbal cues or visual cues, and let them be part of that. How we determine what cueing system they want, and then choose a reinforcer or have a plan for your task, just like we did with our brain dump. We got a plan. Most of you got a plan now for your task, and that's the same thing with prioritizing and planning. How are we going to get through all of those things that we've got floating around in our head? That's when we can do those things like that brain dump, or that's how we can do making a list of all the things and rank ordering them and how important they are. Kids need those same kinds of things. The reality for them is, they may not have to think about who's cooking, what I'm having for supper or what I'm cooking, but they may be thinking about where am I going to get dinner, right? Or some things like that. So, is mom going to be home? My daughter's 20 years old, and I was out of town this weekend. She said, "You just left me." I just left her.
I like this one here because it applies to me. When I'm looking at my task that I've got to do, I typically look at 2 things. Which one has to be done, and which one do I probably dread or prefer?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to say, all right, let's get the dreaded one out of the way, or let's just really focus on the preferred one and really do a bang-up job. So that hits me in the face.
Yep. I didn't mean to click on you there.
No, you're okay.
But I'm going to go on. Let's talk about
need to
organization.
get through 'em.
So some of the things that we talk about with organization are a mystery.
You want me to click? You need me to click?
Yes, please, and thank you. Yeah. So organization. When we're not prepared, well, it could be that we just give kids a task card. You need pencil, you need paper, and you need your book. Right? It's okay to have those. I put a Post-it. Look right here. I put Post-it notes on the front of my book. Right? Why don't we put Post-it notes on this one says don't remember. Don't forget this when you're talking. Right? So why don't we give kids prompts like that to help them remember? So helping them being organized. These are the 5 things, or these are the 2 things, or these are the 3 things that you need when you go to class, and they can have those and help them to be organized. And so, we can use all kinds of prompts or the organizational structures that we can share with kids. We teach them, right? So that's where we always get in this conversation about what's the difference between specially designed instruction and accommodations and modifications. Well, if you just give it to them, you're giving them accommodation. But if you're teaching them how to use a tool, then you're giving them specially designed instruction, right? So that's what we're talking about here. We can't just say, we're giving kids graphic organizer. Any of our kids, and especially we think about our OHI kids, we're saying they're going to use a graphic organizer. Well, if we don't teach them how to use that graphic organizer, they're never going to be able to use it effectively. We may have given them an accommodation, but we've not taught them to use that tool through instruction. And
Fostering independence rather than dependence is the key.
That's right. That's the key. Here's another one on time management, and I think that one's important too. Just like you're talking about, we have to think about how much time do we need to allocate for task. And so that happens all the time. My daughter does that all the time. She doesn't allow enough time, and so time management is a priority for her. She's got to think about how to study and then how she's going to organize time that she studies. So time management is one, and a schedule is good. Timers, cueing devices, and then if you'll give me, and then what does that look like? What can we do in that classroom?
Forgot about that one.
We help them mark the time, right? We can help them mark time. We can show them how to do an estimated time frame. We do that as professionals. We try to think about a process agenda and how much time is it going to take to do this and this and this when we're doing a training in a day, right? We think about how we're going to organize that, and we use an agenda to estimate our time. All right.
Timers really motivate sometimes too. I said a lot of bad things about timers a while ago, but
No, and timers are good too in some ways, yeah. All right, and then this one's just being persistent. But having a goal. Our kids have trouble setting goals, don't they? I think our kids have trouble setting a goal. So it's something that we have to work with them at, and then being able to follow through and not getting distracted. So I have set myself a goal that I have to work 30 minutes every day in the evening from 8:30 to 9 on a paper I'm working on. Right? That's my goal. So I have to try to set aside to get that goal completed by August. So there's things that we have to do and to be able to be persistent. And so we have to give kids opportunities, and they want to have a goal that's motivating. We might want to say you want to go up so many points on this, or you might want to get a next level on your reading, or you may want to know your multiplication chart, your sevens, right? We can give kids tasks and then help them to work toward those tasks. But that teaches them how to be goal directed.
Good.
All right. I'm kind of moving a little quickly because
All right.
of time. And then the metacognition. So that's our thinking about our thinking, right? That's how we think about our thinking. That's what we were just talking about a minute ago. If I had to talk myself through things, y'all ever find yourself having to talk yourself through things? Yeah. So those
Boy,
are,
does she
so-
ever.
right? So
I do too.
I had to problem solve out loud. So a lot of our kids need that dialogue. They need to problem solve and process through there. So that helps them remember and helps them to get through a task. And so that metacognition is real important. Like the success criteria. I got to know, that's why we do success criteria when we think about our lessons, is what does it mean for me to be successful in this class? And how is it that I know that I'm successful? All right, so we're going to do one closing activity. Thinking about, we didn't get to do this with memory, but thinking about a mnemonic. Why do we use mnemonics? But think about a mnemonic that you use. And I always think about that one like Roy G. Biv, right? What is Roy G. Biv? What is a mnemonic that you have learned from school that you remember? You can write it on your paper or that trifold that we had. But put your mnemonic on there. What's something that
good.
you've used for that memory to help you with that? You can use Roy G. Biv, for example, but try to come up with a different. What's a
You have one?
mnemonic?
From grade school? Just write it down and you can share it.
Yeah, you can write them down. Yeah.
You have one? Think. Yeah, it's
You might have a song.
Mine was, if y'all remember Mary's Violet Eyes Make Johnny
Yeah.
Stay Up
Yeah.
Nights,
Please
period.
excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Is that what you said?
That's one, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Has anybody got another
I
one?
use that all the time on the internet. They're constantly putting those TikToks on there and making you try to figure out these mathematics problems. So the PEMDAS really comes into play there, right? That's a good
Yeah.
one.
It's kind of hard for you to
You
think
don't remember
about those,
from my
right?
training, Mary's Violet Eyes Make Johnny Stay Up Nights, period?
Oh, I don't remember that one.
But you have to take the period off now, so it's grammatically incorrect because Pluto does no longer exist. It's not a
It's
planet.
the planets.
It's not a planet.
What'd y'all come up with? Is our lunch ready, Brenda?
Schoolhouse Rock?
Oh, yes. go-
Multiplication,
Okay.
helped you learn your multiplication facts.
Uh-huh.
The 50 States song.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, so a song could
That's
be
good.
use that. Uh-huh.
You're going to have to sing that one for us.
You know it. You can say it. Uh-huh, that's right. Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we use strategies all the time to help kids with memory, right? We use acrostics, we use mnemonics, we do yes.
Now,
In preschool, we use like
supposed to be
songs
back.
for everything.
Yeah, but lunch is not hard.
Okay.
How to spell green, how to
Yeah.
spell red.
Yeah, right.
And then the one that sticks out to me is 30 Days, that's September, April, June.
Oh,
and-
yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good song. You know, I never learned that song and I
those are
can't
all-
remember.
Those are all memory things. And,
Yeah.
and you can apply this to a lot of things, right? A lot of things. So
You can. I was just going to get back over that. So, but the reason I was wanting you all to have an opportunity to do that was to think through one of those acronyms that you've got. I have thought about this one I use in writing. It's the COPS strategy. COPS, right? It's COPS. So I might draw a picture of my little COP strategy, my COP, and I'm going to think about my strategy. My strategy is capitalization, organization, punctuation, and spelling. And so I'm going to create my own little checklist. So if I'm having trouble with a writing piece or being able to be organized with that, I'm going to use my COP strategy. And I'm going to maybe draw a picture of that.
Yeah.
Right. So on the next, and while we're waiting on lunch, it's not hardly here yet. Is lunch not here yet? They're just setting up lunch.
Lunch not here. Okay.
Okay, so while they're setting up lunch, I'm going to let you open up another little page. You don't have to let anybody see it. But what is something that would help you be able to stay organized? So I'm thinking about what could you make a visual cue, thinking about your list, your brain dump, or your visual cue. What could be a visual cue you draw it for yourself that you would use to help you be able to stay organized as you're thinking about your to-do list? And you get to draw a picture of what you think that might be. You got to make that up all on your own.
I was just thinking about mood, measurable,
Oh yeah. No, that's good. So what might help you? You're getting ready to write your IEP goal. What is that going to look like? What might that if you're drawing an emoji or an icon of that or what a picture of that, draw it on your own paper. And we're hoping they show up with lunch because that'll be bad. Lunch is not here.
See, I go to checklists and charts.
Before we break up, let me point you in a couple of things, couple of takeaways. Let me ask you a question first of all. Where does this apply to your work?
Y'all get your picture yet?
Huh? What'd you say?
I said lesson design.
Lesson design.
Okay.
It would certainly apply to lesson design. But what is lesson design? What are you going to do? What's the end result of lesson design? It's learning, right? Student mastery, teaching. But the takeaway here to me is these are things that you say, well, where does this come in the standards? Well, it doesn't come in the standards, right? It doesn't come in the standards in most cases. But it does come in with specially designed instruction. It does come with intervention for students with MTSS. It does come with differentiation and universal design for learning and all of those pieces that kids are supposed to be getting, okay? Because we're instructing them and we're teaching them how to learn, right? Sometimes teaching them how to learn and creating that independence on how to learn is much more powerful than telling them what 2 times 2 is.
That's right.
Okay?
That's right.
So that's the big takeaway. This fits into your specially designed instruction piece so well. That's why we did it today, okay?
Yeah. So if you're going to, anybody want to share their picture? You want to share? Tell us about your picture. You just hold it up and tell us about your picture.
All I have is like it's like a flower pot.
Okay.
Like different things, like the first flower will be the first one.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Or each petal will be good.
Yeah. So you're going to have that visual image of your little flower pot when you think about how you organize your stuff. How about you, Susan? Did you have one?
Mine was just a list, a picture of a list.
A picture of a
Picture
list?
of a list. I
There's
good. That's
nothing wrong
good.
with that. Absolutely.
You had a moon or something?
No, she had a silly face.
Silly
Okay, a
face.
silly face.
I'll
Okay.
tell you what helps me the most, and a guy that we used to work with did it, but we put our kids and we put like what each service that they get, when their IEPs do.
Talking about Rainy.
Yeah. And it like tells me everything about the kid, like when they're due, what their disability is, what services
Yeah.
they get. Because I'm a deadline person, that's what I do.
Yeah. Right. Okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
But I'm paperwork.
Yeah.
Last one. If you look at this word, and we talk about embedded vocabulary instruction all the time. If we look at this word, how would we teach this word to a student that was having trouble making sense out of that? We have this little strategy called hooking. Okay, it's kind of a funny name. Hooking, yeah. And so you'll never forget that, right? And but benevolent. If you break that word down, you can see all kinds of words within that word, can't you? Okay, so here's my list. So we got ben, okay, and if you know Spanish, ben it means what? Good, right? And so benevolent, is it good for you? Is it beneficial? Does it provide a benefit to people? Because when you're benevolent, you give people things that are good for them, right? Lent at the end of the word. I don't know if we have any good solid Catholics in here, but Lent, we kind of know what that is, right? We know what that is. We give up some things in order to be able to focus more and enter into service. I'm not Catholic, but I do understand that sometimes fasting clears our minds and we're able to focus on what we need to focus on. But love is in the middle of that backwards, okay, is benevolence, love. And then Ben, we make a connection, personal connection. When we teach kids to remember, we have to get them to make a personal connection. And this little fella I was working with, or in this little story that they were talking about, Ben had a neighbor who always wore a top hat. And he was always good to me. Okay? So Ben was benevolent. He was always doing things for me. He was giving me little pieces of candy. He was giving me some money. So when you try to draw those connections, but that's just one way of breaking that big old word down and making it make sense and hitting on both sides of the brain, making them get up and put their stuff in different places in the rooms, important, all those kinds of things. But hooking is the strategy there to break those big words down.